The book by David Hume was published in London. His book is entitled An Inquiry Concerning Human Understanding. David Hume was known for his idea of skepticism and empiricism. Section 2 talks about the belief that all knowledge comes from what we perceive and notice using our five senses, which are sight, smell, taste, hear, and feel, rather than using reasoning and theoretical speculation. Nothing at first view may seem more unbounded than the thought of man, which not only escapes all human power and authority, but is not even restrained within the limits of nature and reality. And while the body is confined to one planet, along which it creeps with pain and difficulty, the thought can in an instant transport us into the most distant regions of the universe, or even beyond the universe, into the unbounded chaos where nature is supposed to lie in total confusion. What never was seen or heard of may yet be conceived, nor is anything beyond the power of thought except what implies an absolute contradiction.
According to Hume, the perceptions of the mind can be divided into two classes. One is ideas and the other is impressions. Impressions are distinguished from ideas, which are the less lively perceptions, of which we are conscious when we reflect on any of those sensations or moments. And all of our ideas or more feeble perceptions are copies of our impressions or more lively ones. He added that our brains can only function in four such ways: compounding, transposing, augmenting, or diminishing elements obtained with our five senses. Besides, he held that truthful and factual claims about reality can be empirical, since they are directly directed at our five senses.
The mind can only contain so many concepts at once, and abstract thoughts in particular are naturally faint and indistinct. They are also prone to being confused with other ideas that are similar to them. And when we use a phrase repeatedly, even when its definition is unclear, we have a tendency to think it has a fixed meaning. In contrast, all perceptions or feelings, whether internal or external, are potent and vivid.
In the next section,
Well-defined
David
limits.
Hume asks how humans get their ideas, whether from their perceptions or impressions. All thoughts must be supported by logical connections, of which he believes there are only three, which are resemblance, contiguity, and cause and effect.
Let's begin with resemblance. We could group two impressions of distinct trees into one type of tree based on their similarities, since they have a similar appearance. Next in resemblance is contiguity. We could draw a link when we notice a bird perched on the tree. Last but not least, cause and effect. For example, a kettle of boiling water over an open flame. Let's assume for the moment that the heat is the reason why the water is boiling. It is evident that there is a connection between the many things, thoughts, or ideas in the mind, and that they act systematically and predictably in the memory or imagination.
Section 4 discusses how there are two categories into which all of the objects of human reason or inquiry can be placed, namely, relations of ideas and matters of fact. Relations of ideas are propositions that may be made simply by thinking about them, independent of everything else in the universe, such as she times 5 is equal to the half of 30, or the square of the hypotenuse is equal to the squares of the two sides. On the other hand, since it is dependent on our experiences and cannot be foreseen, the matters of fact cannot be known. To claim that tomorrow's sunrise is unlikely is an incomprehensible idea, and to imply that it would rise only indicates the opposite of what has been said.
Because all causes and consequences are known by our prior experience rather than reason, we are unable to demonstrate our past predictions, which are exclusively dependent on inductive reasoning. Furthermore, nothing guarantees that the same relationships between causes and consequences will persist in the future.
Section 5. In this section, Hume focuses on the notion of custom and habits, which, in our minds, link causes and effects to make guesses about the future. Here, Hume touches upon the difference between fiction and belief. Even while we are well aware that we can prove its cause and effect, we yet behave as if we can. Why do we act this way? Because of custom and habit. This fact about human nature is sufficient for us to connect the dots.
As a result, every inference drawn from experience are products of customs rather than reasoning. Custom serves as the basic compass for human existence. The principle is the sole thing that makes our previous experiences useful to us and helps us predict a similar line of events in the future. We always assert that this inclination is a product of custom if the repetition of a certain act or operation leads to a predisposition to perform that act or action again without being motivated by any thought or mental process. Similar to this, imagination is closely related to our experience even though it has the unbounded ability to combine, compound, separate, and divide these concepts into various kinds of fiction and vision. We already know that nature has built relationships between various concepts, and that as soon as one notion enters our minds, its corresponding concept introduces itself and draws our attention to it in a subtle unconscious movement. These three concepts of linkage or association, such as
Section
resemblance,
7. Jung suggests
contiguity,
that
and
there are no
causation.
ideas which occur in metaphysics more obscure and uncertain than those of power, energy, or necessary connection, of which it is every moment necessary for us to treat in all our disquisitions. Additionally, it brings to mind this claim that all our ideas are nothing but copies of our impressions, and that all complex concepts and impressions are combinations of simple ones that are founded on our rich sensory perception of the universe. So, Hume traces the idea of causation to its roots of impressions that it is derived from. Impression. Let's look for the impression in all the places where it could possibly be found, to find it with more certainty. When we analyze the functioning of causes while looking around at external things, we are never able to identify any force or required connection, any quality that connects the cause and effect and makes one an inevitable result of the other. Pretension. We can see that this influence is a truth that, like all other natural occurrences, can only be known via experience and cannot be predicted by any apparent force or energy in the cause that would link it to the effect and make the one an inevitable result of the other. Assurance. Because when we give rise to animal action or employ our limbs for their intended purpose and office, our idea of power is not copied from any sentiment of sense of power within ourselves. When we look into the interactions between different bodies and consider the operation of causes, we are never able in a single instance to discover any power or necessary connection, any quality which binds the effect to the cause and renders the one an infallible consequence of the other. So, from merely looking at the interactions between billiard balls, it is impossible, therefore, that the idea of power can be derived from the contemplation of bodies. Hume then moves from body-body interactions to mind-body interactions. We learn the influence of our will from experience alone, and experience only teaches us how one event constantly follows another, without instructing us in the secret connection which binds them together and renders them inseparable. Hume looks into mind-mind interactions which he fails to find a connection. First, he wonders at the existence of an idea from nothing. We only feel the event, namely, the existence of an idea, consequent into a command of the will, but the manner in which this operation is performed, the power by which it is produced, it is entirely beyond our comprehension. Second, the command of the mind over itself is limited, as well as its command over the body, and these limits are not known by reason, or any acquaintance with the nature of cause and effect, but only by experience and observation, as in all other natural events and in the operation of external objects. Third, this self-command is very different at different times. Hume also attacks occasionalist philosophers who believe that those objects which are commonly denominated causes are in reality nothing but occasions, and that the true and direct principle of every effect is not any power or force in nature, but a volition of the Supreme Being who wills that such particular objects should forever be conjoined with each other. Hume objects to this idea by saying that it is too bold of a statement and writes the following: I cannot perceive any force in the arguments on which this theory is founded. We are ignorant, it is true, of the manner in which bodies operate on each other. Their force or energy is entirely incomprehensible, but we are not equally ignorant of the manner or force by which a mind, even the supreme mind, operates either on itself or on body. Hume then proceeds to suggest that one event follows another, but we never can observe any tie between them. They seem conjoined but never connected. The necessary conclusion seems to be that we have no idea of connection or power at all. But Hume then takes a positive turn in his skepticism to argue that it appears, then, that this idea of a necessary connection among events arises from a number of similar instances which occur of the constant conjunction of these events. Nor can that idea be suggested by any one of these instances, surveyed in all possible lights and positions. After a repetition of similar instances, the mind is carried by habit, upon the appearance of one event, to expect its usual attendant, and to believe that it will exist when we say thought and give rise to this influence, by which they become proofs of each other's existence. So, the only immediate utility of all sciences is to teach us how to control and regulate future events by their causes. Hume draws the conclusion that we are unable to see any link or important connection between events, saying that we are unaware of any relationship or effect. He further believes that repeated observations of events that frequently occur together lead us to believe that certain interactions are necessary. Our minds begin to develop the habit of predicting certain events to happen after others, giving the impression that there is a connection between them.
Hume taught us to be skeptical of complex ideas because while we can explain their formation, we can't prove their reality.